I want to start off by asking a simple question. Who here has friends? Okay, basically everyone has a hand up. If you don't, I apologize. Friends are an interesting thing. There are thousands of kinds of friends that we can choose from. But when you look at your friends, it can be really hard to pinpoint exactly how you guys became friends, and especially why. There are a lot of factors that go into play when making friends, but today I want us to look at ourselves. Our personality. In the time that I'm here, I wanted us to talk about the many types of personalities, what they mean about ourselves, and how they shape the way we choose our friends. Now, when thinking about personality, it can be very hard to explain because it's not a set in stone factor that defines a person. If anything, it helps that person define themselves. When thinking about personality, an easy way to think of it is this. Stop. Personality is something that arises from within and is consistent throughout their life. It can encompass all of their thoughts, behaviors, patterns, social attitudes in a way that will impact the way they view themselves and how they believe about the world and themselves and others. The broadest way that we can define personality is through extroversion and introversion. Now, when looking at extroversion and introversion, we can see that it is determined by sociability, talkativeness, assertiveness, and excitability. Basically, when looking at extroversion and introversion, we can determine it by how socially awkward we are. First off, we're going to look at extroversion. Now, who here thinks they're an extrovert? Those of you who raise your hands, I can assume that you guys enjoy social interactions, are energetic, and outgoing people. Extroverts typically gravitate towards groups, they are more prone to be leaders, and they enjoy to form friendships more than introverts do. Now, when extroverts form those friendships, the friendships are with people with similar degrees of extroversion as themselves. And when you want to look at extroversion scientifically, you can see that extroverts are not as sensitive to outer stimuli as introverts are, and they need to seek out those outer stimuli, actually, in order to reach a sort of equilibrium in order to perform well and be satisfied. Now, on the other side, who thinks they are an introvert? Introverts, I can assume, of those who raise their hands, you guys are polar opposites of extroverts. You see social situations in a totally different way. You guys are thoughtful, reserved, quiet, and you guys like to keep your thoughts to yourselves. Now, I'm not saying extroverts can't display these traits. I'm just saying that introverts tend to display them more in social situations than extroverts would. Now, when looking at this, you can see that introverts, when they are put in social situations, they can quickly exhaust their mental reserves or energy. They would really like to be in solitude and quiet a lot sooner than extroverts would. Again, scientifically, introverts are very sensitive to noise and bright colors, a lot more than extroverts are, and they prefer simplicity in their environments, and they don't require external stimulation. Now we're going to look at personality a lot broader, because you can't really number the amount of personalities that a single person can have. But when you look at psychology, you can get a better grasp of how many personalities there are and what they mean about us. We're going to start out with a psychologist named Gordon Allport. Now, Gordon Allport is called the father of personality psychology, and in the early 1900s, he made a list of over 4,000 personalities that a single person can have. Now, that's a lot of personalities. So he was able to narrow it down to 3 major categories that would define a person, and those categories are cardinal traits, central traits, and secondary traits. Now, the first category are cardinal traits. Cardinal traits are the most dominant kinds of traits, and they are the ones that a person become known for. They're the major ones that can become so tied to a person's personality that it can end up shaping their behavior, their purpose, their attitudes, decisions, and so on. And a couple examples of this are Mother Teresa, who is known for extraordinary kindness, and Abraham Lincoln, who got a nickname for his honesty, Honest Abe. The next category would be central traits. Now, central traits are much more common than cardinal traits, and this is because they're the building blocks of a person's personality. These are the major terms that you would use to describe yourself, like kind, smart, funny, honest, friendly, and so on. And Allport believed that there was about 5 to 10 that a person could contain at one time, and he believed that they could contain many of them, but have one in very high levels and one in lower, so they vary, which is why people show more kindness than they would if they were smart or friendly and stuff like that. The last category is secondary traits. Now, secondary traits, they are traits that only present themselves in certain situations. This is if say, a cool and collected person will go up and talk in front of people, and if they're usually cool and collected, they become very anxious and nervous when they talk in front of people like this, like now. Another example would be if an easygoing person could become very, very short-tempered when put under a lot of stress. Now, these, again, are rare, and they only show up in very certain situations, even if the person is usually another way. Now, remember, the categories that I just described are very, very broad. They don't really describe exactly how a person is, because it contains over 4,000 different personality traits that Allport was able to discover. Now, we're going to simplify this a bit. This is Raymond Cattell. Raymond Cattell took that list of 4,000 after Allport, and he narrowed it down to 16. And he described these as 16 source personality traits. Now, these weren't exactly personality traits. These were more factors that would influence behaviors that we would later determine as personality traits. Now, here's the list of the 16 traits. This 16 is a lot, and I didn't want to memorize them, so I put them on the board for you guys to look at. And by looking at it, you can tell that these aren't exactly personality traits that someone can have. Like, you wouldn't describe yourself as sensitivity and social boldness. But these are different traits and factors that, if you have a certain level of them, you could become known for a personality of having that. And Cattell, when he made these, he determined that personality existed on a continuum, which means, as I described, that they existed from high levels on one and low on another, so you could have various levels, but you would have in your personality the majority of these, but some would be more apparent than others. Now we're going to go from 16 source traits to 5 big traits, and these were described in the Big Five theory. The Big Five theory was determined after many years of many psychologists' work in the 1900s, and this is basically the broad categories of personality traits that kind of encompasses everything that we've talked about. And these exist on a very large range of extremes because, again, a person can't really have just one big trait or a lot of big ones. It's very broad ones that they can have in different levels and varieties. And an easy way to remember this is in the acronym OCEAN, which is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. After learning all of this, it is important to understand that personalities and what personalities someone could possess is important to see that when after looking at all those, what influences personalities, because it's hard to really determine what personalities you have if you don't know how you get them. When you look at this, it is easy to see that a lot of factors can go into it, and that includes environmental factors, biological, and friends and different situations, basically nurture and nature. Those both come into play. But another really large factor that can play into personalities is maturation, which basically means as people get older, their personalities can change and shift. And research shows that the vast majority of people, as they get older, they tend to become less extroverted and more open to experience and change, which kind of varies. But they also become more agreeable and have more conscientiousness as they age as well. When looking at this, once you understand the spectrum on which personalities exist and vary, you find yourself one step closer to being able to understand how friends and personalities mix, because that's what we're here to talk about, friendships and personalities. And it's important to note that not all of the traits and factors work together to influence each other, but it's the little ones when they balance out each other and they complement each other and they line up with each other, that's how it shapes different friendships we have. And again, I want to note that a single individual can have a couple thousand personalities in themselves. Now imagine two people who are friends. They each have their own couple thousand personalities. That means there's a really high chance for them to have similar personalities but on different levels. And that means that a lot of different things can come into play when shaping that friendship and developing it and changing it. And this basically boils down to what each person wants to gain from the friendship. And whether you want to admit it or not, every friendship you have has a subconscious motivation behind it. The way your traits and your central traits and your cardinal traits and your big 16 source traits and everything, all that complements the traits possessed by your friend, that will shape the development and process of the friendship that you guys share. It is very common for people to favor those who have traits in high levels that they may be lacking in. For example, if someone has a very low level of self-control and they have a hard time controlling themselves in public, they might find themselves seeking out people who have high levels of self-control to compensate for the trait that they are lacking in. That is just one example. There are endless scenarios on which people's personalities line up and complement each other in order to best benefit their own personalities, which is why we change to be more like our friends, whether we like it or not. Now, after knowing all this, friendship can be a very hard thing to dissect. No two people are the same, which means that there are infinite ways and reasons people become friends, but it all can be traced back to their personalities. Now, when we learn how to value personalities, we can understand how they create relationships, why they become friends with certain people, and what that means about ourselves. So the next time you're looking at your friends, don't be afraid to take a deeper look into those friendships. You might learn a thing or two about yourself and your own personalities. Thank you. Yeah.
I really like how the end you posted about Python. Like you could use what we learned from the previous thing you said, make each other apply it to our own.
Yeah.
You have like a really good volume and pace. This like entire talk of you got really fast and really slow at different times. So like wasn't like you were talking fast because you were nervous. It was because it was out of focus.
Kind of. I just have like little notes on here, so sometimes it got hard to like remember the transition that I had in mind, but like I didn't exactly have it all written down.
It sounded pretty good. This is a good example of what it sounds like when somebody knows the topic so well.